Hey Debbie, what you got for us today? It's always such great topics and useful things. I take bunches of notes. So what you got?
Well, like I always do, I bring into our webinar on the first and third Fridays situations that show up in my office. And just recently, I have had betrayed partners coming in with the really big question of why didn't I notice what was going on? How did I miss this? And as a result, they're at that point in their beginning stages of recovery where they're trying to figure out this exact question. And so they're beginning to put those puzzle pieces together. As human beings, we are naturally drawn to asking the question, why? And so our brains want to take the bits and pieces of information that we know in the current moment and continue to add to that and try to get a complete picture of what we are dealing with in regards to our betrayal trauma. I do notice that in this process that the betrayed partner oftentimes becomes very critical of themselves because they didn't notice what was going on. They didn't even think to question what they were seeing, that somehow, even though they have had this experience with betrayal for a number of years, they just didn't put the pieces together. And so they become very, very critical of themselves. So it's really interesting because as they're starting to gain this awareness of their betrayal trauma, they start to realize that some of these behaviors they saw their addict partners doing really were indicators and signs. So, for example, they may have seen their addict partners being highly controlling of situations. There may have been extreme mood swings back and forth with the addict that were unexplainable and maybe sometimes unreasonable. And the betrayed partner was very confused by it. Their addict partners were very evasive in responding to questions, and the answers often contained a lot of gaslighting. There was increasing isolation. They saw their addict partners pulling away, isolating not only from them, maybe from their family, children, friends, those types of behaviors where more and more they're spending time alone. The addict partner may have been demanding perfection of their partner, their wife or their girlfriend, their children. And that then becomes a lot of pressure that the betrayed partner starts to feel. Oftentimes, in this demanding of perfection, I see that betrayed partners often share that I never could get it right. Every time I did something, he or she was telling me all the things I was doing wrong. And so I kept trying to fix myself. I tried to keep doing it better and better and better. And somehow I never hit the target. I just couldn't. It was always constantly moving. They may have noticed that if you've got an addict who's got a porn addiction or a sex addiction, that they're wanting sex, but there's really no attention, there's no romance, there's no real, sexual intimacy, that real connection that a betrayed partner will sense when it's missing. Again, like I'd mentioned earlier, the addict partner might take the betrayed partner and tell them, hey, you're the problem that we're having marital issues. It's you're the one contributing to this. And that can be very confusing. Oftentimes I'm working with partners and trying to get them to recognize what they're responsible for and what the addict partner is responsible for when they're in the midst of this. They might notice that the addict partner is spending a lot of time away from the family, especially when things are stressful. They might just kind of escape and just kind of disappear, whether it's back into a bedroom with the door shut, or they leave the house, or they stay at work longer. They notice that they've got these behaviors where they're spending more and more time away. And another thing that's very, very confusing is oftentimes betrayed partners will see the addict partner being perfect in public. So they are the perfect husband, the perfect boyfriend, the perfect father. But what happens behind closed doors at home is very, very differently. So while these types of behaviors are strong indicators that the partner, that addict partner, truly has an addiction, the betrayed partner somehow isn't aware of all of this. And it seems like they just ignore all the signs and they don't even question it. So what I then see in my office are the betrayed partners are saying, how could I have been so stupid? What is wrong with me? I thought I was a really intelligent woman or a really intelligent man. How did I miss this? It's so embarrassing that everyone else could see this, but I couldn't. Or when I went to my partner, I kept asking, are you having problems? Do you have a porn addiction? Do you have a sex addiction? Are you using drugs? They just keep telling me no. So why did I believe him or her? Especially when my intuition was telling me something different. Something just seemed to be nagging at me. So let's talk a little bit today about betrayal blindness. And I'm going to talk about this through that codependence lens of attachment. We're also going to talk about it in regards to survival and how our brains are wired. It is not denial. I know in the codependence lens, we talk about this as being denial, but we're going to talk about the reasons why we might go into this state of blindness. And we're going to look at it through all the research that's been done on attachment, on emotion regulation, which is the function of the brain, and that mind-body connection. So there really is a purpose to having those not knowing behaviors. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So Jennifer Freed is a psychologist and a researcher who was the one who back in the late 90s identified betrayal trauma. So she's also spent a number of years really researching why people don't allow themselves to see the betrayal that is unfolding right in front of their eyes, and why sometimes they don't even remember the traumas they've experienced it. And she has coined this term betrayal blindness. So here's what happens when this is occurring. Because we as human beings are wired by nature to connect with someone else, it becomes a part of our survival. So we know we need other human beings in order to survive. At times when that attachment is threatened, what will happen is that person will go into a state of either fight and flight, which is a very empowered state. With that, I do something about it. I either fight it or I get out of it. However, there are some who go into more of a freeze and a fawn response. Again, this is part of a wiring in our brain. I believe as a therapist that oftentimes our response, whether we go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, has a lot to do with some of the experiences we had in childhood and how our brains have wired throughout the years in response to those experiences. So when I go into this not knowing state or this betrayal blindness, it's because I'm going into a freeze response or I'm going into more of a fawn response. Because if I were to face the fact that this is happening, it is threatening my very survival. It is threatening my safety. And we are hardwired again as human beings to depend on being connected to other people in order to not only survive, but even to grow and thrive. And that's the ideal situation, is to thrive and kind of have people that are there to support us. However, that doesn't always happen. So there's some mechanisms that will occur as a result of this. So when we have a partner who goes into betrayal blindness, again, remember they're in this freeze or fawn response. They're not going to confront a cheating partner at times. They're not going to confront somebody who's withdrawing from the relationship. So oftentimes they even fail to notice it. They fail to even process the information that's before them, because in an unconscious way, and you've got to understand, this is done very unconsciously, and it is what we call a maladaptive survival mechanism, meaning it's not the healthiest way to do it. However, in that moment, that person's brain believes that it is the best way to handle the situation. So in order to continue in the relationship, they have to just not even notice that it's existing. They don't focus on it. And that feels like the safest option in that moment. So the betrayed partner is going to do whatever they can to preserve the attachment. And so instead of going into this state of knowing what I know, they choose to go into, I don't want to know what I don't know, and I don't want to see what I can't see, because that feels like the safest way to maintain connection. So the betrayed partner does these behaviors not because they're stupid, not because they're in denial, but because it's human nature. It is part of their human nature and their wiring. And so they remain unaware in these important relationships because it is threatening their safety. However, it also comes at a high cost to their mental health and their physical health. So there are times when I have a client come in and I see their mental health being so challenged, I see it deteriorating, I see their physical health getting worse. And sometimes that's the point where they're finally open to seeing that what's going on in the relationship is actually, and them not facing it, is actually causing this and contributing to this. So this comes at a great cost. So one of the things as a therapist, I see my role is helping my clients understand what's happening to them, maybe why they're doing what they're doing. I have a philosophy, and my philosophy is this, and that is, we are all doing what we are doing in the moment for what we believe are all the right reasons. So in that moment, I might have a client come in and they're choosing to be in betrayal blindness. And I'm looking at that client as, they're doing this because they believe this is the best way to handle it. So I've kind of put together some questions that I would challenge those that could possibly be caught up in betrayal blindness to ask themselves. So remember, with betrayal blindness, there's this state of mind in which you choose to keep a secret from yourself. You choose not to face it. So the question to ask yourself is this: do you choose to minimize or not focus on what's happening with your partner's behaviors and in your relationship? So get real with yourself. You may need some help and support with this, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Remember, with betrayal blindness, you don't allow yourself to see or reflect on what's going on, and you don't fully engage with your reality, because if you did, you may discover that it's going to threaten your relationship with the person who betrayed you, meaning the relationship may end. So the question to ask is, if I start to focus on the reality of my situation, do I experience high levels of distress, anxiety, and emotional dysregulation? So then I choose to stop focusing on what I see happening. It's very common, okay? Remaining in a state of betrayal blindness takes so much energy and time. And in that process, the betrayed partner learns to develop habits of how they see things, their perceptions. They go into certain thought patterns. They have patterns of behavior because they need to maintain status quo, meaning I need things to keep continuing as they are. I don't want to upset the cart. I don't want things to go bad. So the questions to ask are, do you find yourself making excuses for your addict partner's behaviors so that you can somehow manage it? When others try to point out what they see happening in your, relationship with your addict partner, do you become defensive? Do you defend the addict partner? Do you defend yourself and the reasons why you stay in the relationship? Do you deny or minimize what is coming up as far as what you're noticing, what's coming into your awareness? Do you somehow choose to minimize it, not make it seem so bad? Or do you say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to worry about that later on. Right now, it's not that big of a deal. So you need to be aware of that. So with betrayal blindness, we aren't completely truthful with ourselves. We turn a blind eye. So we don't look at what's actually happening. So the question to consider is, do you tell yourself that things will get better, especially if you don't make a big deal of it, or if you don't bring what you're seeing to your partner's attention? So if I just kind of let it slide, will things stay more stable? When you have betrayal trauma, when the reality of what's happening in your world and the consequences of the reality become more frightening than it is to work through the healing process, you have to stop and somehow make changes. So what you have to ask is, do you have concerns that if you address and acknowledge your addict partner's addiction, it could cause the relationship to end? Will I have to do life differently And could that mean I no longer stay in the relationship? That is a big one that comes into my office. And that's one that creates a lot of worry and anxiety and fear. Another question, does it seem easier to deal with my current situation rather than moving forward? Is it easier for me to deal with what I know than to somehow have to face what I don't know, which is the future, how things are going to turn out, if my partner's going to actually, because I've now brought it out in the open, they're going to choose to do recovery or they may not. Another question is, does the thought of ending the relationship create so much fear and concern that I'm going to choose to live in this current state? Because my fear is so great that I just can't go there. Okay. So with betrayal blindness, you're willing to tolerate the intolerable because you don't want to deal with the ramifications. So the question to ask here is, do you avoid having the hard discussions with the addict partner about these behaviors you're seeing that might indicate that they are in their addiction because you are concerned and fearful that it will go poorly, that it will create more problems in the relationship, or your partner is going to get angry or going to rage? So if you answer, in the affirmative that yes, there are parts of me that have some betrayal blindness, it's now time to face it and to work on getting out of it. So I'm going to talk about some things to do in order to start that process. Number one, a partner who's experiencing betrayal needs to understand that getting out of this blindness cannot be done without help. So you've got to create and develop safe and supportive relationships that will help you in this process. So betrayed partners need to have somebody that they can interact with who has empathetic support so that they have this simultaneous, support as they're starting to bring forward the truth about what's actually happening in their world. So now I'm taking what was in my unconscious part of my mind and I'm bringing it into my consciousness. It's a hard process. I'm all of a sudden having to recognize all that I've gone through, all that I've put up with, how damaging this has been. And it's a hard place to be, especially if you're doing it alone. That's why it's so important that you find a very qualified therapist, somebody who understands betrayal trauma, who is qualified and they understand addiction. They understand this process of somehow I've got to help, as a therapist, this betrayed partner gain some internal strength, the coping skills and mechanisms they need in the process as they are moving into recognizing their reality. That is an important part because my job as a therapist is to support my clients in gaining the skills and the tools so that they have the strength and the ability to start their own healing process. In therapy, the betrayed partner is going to start to work on increasing their confidence, their sense of self, so they are able to finally look at the whole picture. They're now in a place where they're willing to put all those puzzle pieces together, and they're able to see that they can actually survive this emotionally, physically, relationally, spiritually. So it's important that you have a very good therapist. In conjunction with that, getting into a really good group that will help you heal from betrayal trauma is another way to add to that support. I think in interacting with other women who are healing from betrayal trauma is very, very powerful because we learn from other people's experiences, not only their good experiences, but even their bad experiences. We find that people can relate to where we're at, and all of a sudden we don't feel like somehow we've done it all wrong. Because remember, like I said, we are all doing what we are doing when we're experiencing betrayal trauma for what we think are all the right reasons in the moment. And all of a sudden now we've learned that there's a better way. And oftentimes we feel powerless. We don't know how to do it. And we need other people to help us. We can't do it alone. The second thing we've got to do is we have to face the betrayal blindness and take the steps to get out of it. Not only do we need to have a therapist, but we also now have to face the facts. So this is really big. I've got to face the facts regarding my experience. So I have to face the facts that my husband is actively in an addiction, that my husband or my boyfriend, my partner is a liar and not telling me the truth. It might be that I have overlooked things that I realize now I intentionally overlooked them. I need to educate myself regarding this blindness, maybe why I've done it, figure out why I've done it. Maybe, like I said earlier, it's because this is how my brain's been wired due to earlier experiences in life. And in this process, I've got to learn to own my own reality. So one of the exercises I take my clients through is, okay, let's look at all of the things you're noticing, just the data. So what I might have them do is just journal what they're noticing. And that's the first step. I say, I just want you to become that, what I call that compassionate observer, where you kind of step into this space where you're not going to judge yourself. You're not even going to judge the addict partner. You're just going to notice what's happening. Notice the facts and write them down. Then oftentimes I have them bring it in to session. And as we talk about it, we then go into the next step, which is, as you see this happening, how does that make you feel? And so we talk about the emotions it brings up. And then we go to, what are the stories or the perceptions that you tell yourself when you see this and you feel this? And as we talk through that, there's a lot of awareness that happens. The betrayed partner starts connecting the dots. All of a sudden, we go from that unconscious state of mind to that conscious. We bring it up into the awareness. So that's very, very important. Another process is to journal what your intuition is telling you. I'll take my clients through the steps of tuning back into your intuition and starting to trust and believe your intuition. Again, journaling what your intuition is telling you, bringing it back into therapy, or going back to your journaling and going, gosh, am I still noticing this? As time gone on, have I noticed that, gosh, my intuition was dead on, right? And journal that too. And we do that by looking back in the beginning days as we're trying to strengthen our intuition and trusting our intuition. That's a really great process. Pretty soon, the betrayed partner in their healing will get to that point where, you know what, I'm just going to go with my intuition. I'm going to trust it. But it takes work. And it's one of the steps that you have to do to get out of the betrayal blindness. You have to learn to be truthful with yourself, confront your fears, and choose to stop being aware. That means I have to choose to do recovery, my own recovery. At some point, I have to choose to stop focusing on my addict partner's recovery and what they're doing and needing them for my ability to feel better, to feel grounded, stabilized, and do my healing. And I just have to focus on me doing my own recovery work. I have to learn how to do my own emotional regulation. I also need to look at the facts. And I wanted to go through with you here at the very end, just some clues that we have to finally recognize and be real about. That when I see this happening in my relationship, these are strong indicators that I'm in relationship with somebody who's in an active addiction. Now, I'm going to, word this, in the terms of somebody who's got a porn addiction, a sex addiction, this unwanted sexual compulsivity, problematic porn use, however you want to describe it. So this also applies to even those who may have other addictions, whether it's drug addiction, it's gambling addiction. Some of these things hold true for all of these types of addictions. So some of the things you've got to be aware of are, what am I seeing my partner do? So for example, is my partner demonstrating a loss of interest in sexual relations with me? Or am I seeing them do the opposite? All of a sudden, they've got this insatiable appetite for sex and they're demanding it. They're needing it, and they're needing it a lot. I've got to get real about that this is addictive behaviors. Another clue and another sign that you need to be aware of, does my partner seem to be emotionally disconnected when there's sexual intimacy? Are they just focusing on the physical act itself? There's really no interaction, like that emotional connection. There is no communication about it. So we're talking about what works and, how to connect so both parties are fulfilled and it feels like it's taking the relationship deeper. Instead, has sex become very cold or rigid, maybe rushed, disconnected? Does the partner even come in and want you to do things that you don't feel comfortable doing sexually? Maybe bringing ideas into the bedroom that you're going, where in the world did this come from? And it might be that they push your boundaries, even though you're saying, I don't feel comfortable with this. Does the partner have demands about sex and when they want it, how often they want it? Are there any mood swings associated with the addict partner before sex or even after sex? So those are other clues and signs to be aware of. Another thing is your non-sexual intimacy in the marriage diminishing? So are we not having heart-to-heart talks? Are we not talking about things in general? Are we not having physical contact? Like, are there hugs? Are we not kissing? Are we not going out and doing things together? Like having joint recreation or having hobbies together? Are we not going to church together or praying together if that was a part of our lifestyle? So am I noticing that some of those things we used to do are diminishing? Another thing is, has my partner become increasingly more intolerant of the sexual contact on what they're seeing on TV, in magazines, in conversations, in their humor? Am I noticing that maybe all of a sudden they're saying jokes and they're saying comments to me that somehow are very degrading towards women sexually, or it's more sexually inappropriate? Just this last week, I had somebody share with me that their partner, what they've noticed is when they're not in recovery, they also have a tendency to stare at somebody they find sexually attractive, whether it's male or female, and they notice it, and it's very obvious that this behavior is happening. And again, that's an indicator that that person is struggling with their sobriety or they're in an addiction. Does your partner start to pay more attention to sexualized magazine covers in the grocery store, catalogs in the mail? Are they on the internet surfing and looking at lingerie? That's another one I hear that comes up quite often. So they're kind of doing some of those types of behaviors. Another one, does your partner get up in the middle of the night and watch TV or surf the internet, and they do this in secret? Do they go into the bedroom and lock the door? Do they go into their office and shut the door and do it behind closed doors? They go into the bathroom. So there's that secrecy involved. Another one is, does the partner begin to shirk their responsibilities, like household projects, spending time with the children, spending time with you? You might see somebody who's in their addiction failing to keep commitments. They might show up late from work. They might become very, very unreliable. Even asking them to unload the dishwasher or take out the garbage and they agree to do it, and 2 days later it hasn't been done, can be an indicator if this is, combining it with all these other symptoms and signs and clues that I've talked about. Is something to consider. Another one, does your partner spend more and more time alone? So are there late hours at the office? Are they staying up late, like I said earlier, on the internet? Are they withdrawing from you? Are they, when you're having a family gathering, are they going off and being by themselves rather than being with the group? Are they no longer maybe as involved in your church activities that you used to participate in together? Another one is, my partner on more of an emotional roller coaster? Am I seeing these mood swings up and down? They're moody, they're irritable, they're short-tempered, they're unpredictable. I never know as a partner what mood they're going to be in. That's another indicator. Is your partner have diminished interest in spiritual things? If they were a spiritual person, they may not be saying prayers, going to church, reading scripture, if that was part of your lifestyle. Instead, they might become more critical of you if you are doing that. And so that's something to consider. That could be an indication that maybe their own shame is coming up. Does your partner, again, not to want to socialize with others? Maybe they are very critical of other people. They are intimidated by other people as a result of maybe, again, their own shame coming up. Is your partner decreasingly dishonest? Are they even lying about things they don't need to be lying about? That's a big one that I see partners starting to notice. Does your partner have a hard time focusing? Are they physically present, but their mind is somewhere else? I just feel like you're not fully with me. And then another thing to consider is, are there some unexplained expenditures? All of a sudden, is there money missing? Are they spending more money? Are there more ATM withdrawals? Are they just things just don't seem to ring true or make sense? So those are some of the things that we have to look at and really start to be aware of and be willing to notice. So the last thing you've got to do is you've got to confront your betrayal blindness and the reasons that you're in it. So we have to really go deeper. And again, with the help of a therapist and with help of group processing, you've got to go in and ask yourself, if I were to face this issue, what would I have to feel? And you've got to learn to feel those emotions and not ignore them and learn how to push through them and feel them. And again, it is a great space to do that is in a therapist's office. You've got to ask yourself, what would change for me? You've got to be very clear. If I were to face this, what's going to change? Is it I'm going to have better boundaries? Is I'm going to have to grieve the loss here? Am I have to face the fact that my relationship may end? And how do I stay in the present moment and just deal with whatever's coming from day to day and gain the skills and tools I need in order to be able to cope with whatever comes my way? What am I fearful about? What scares me about this? If I were to decide I'm no longer going to be blind to this, right? What's my greatest fears? And then what would I potentially lose if I do? We have to face our fears. There's that common phrase you might hear your therapist say, and that is, what we resist persists. So if I choose not to face my fears, I'm going to continue to be in fear. So we have to push through that. So once you're clear about why you're avoiding the issue or having the betrayal blindness, then the next big question is, what support do I need to have around me? Who do I put in place so that I can face the reality of my situation, because you can't do it alone? And then what will help me feel strong enough and grounded enough to look at the issues I've been avoiding? So what do I need? This is going to be something that changes. It's going to be very fluid. And as you're going through your recovery, you're going to notice that you're going to add more and more and more things to that. And so there is a lot to this, right? I know that I want a healthy relationship, but sometimes, we become like that frog in the pot of water. And I've used this analogy probably 3 or 4 times this last week. And that is, we end up in these situations oftentimes because when we started out, we were in that pot of cold water and the heat just kind of turned up gradually. And a frog, when we gradually put that frog in a cold pot of water and turn the heat up, it eventually becomes a boiling pot of water, and the frog just chooses to stay in it, as opposed to the frog who jumps into a pot of boiling water will immediately get out. So that's how it happens. I think one of the things we're going to do as we move on to the next webinar is we're going to talk a little bit about the secrecy of addiction and what happens, with that secrecy, especially with the addict partner and the betrayed partner, that kind of contributes to betrayal blindness. So I think we're going to add another dimension to that of why sometimes it is so hard as a betrayed partner to understand what's happening. And it may kind of lead us into some of that blindness because the addict is in the secrecy of their own addiction. So anyway, those are some thoughts that I've had as I've, seen clients come in and starting to really face the reality of their situation.
And I was like, take a deep breath, because this is hard stuff. This is seriously, I'm getting emotional because I'm like, this is really hard. And especially if you've got an addict that's going, no, 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 like all that gaslighting and blame shifting and all of those things. I talked to lots of betrayed partners, and they're like, I can't even trust my intuition anymore. So being empowered to start going, hey, I'm going to really look at my reality. That's kind of scary. When you're talking about fear, what can I lose? But I was like, what can you gain? Just like the flip side of that is, what will I gain if I'm willing to do this? And I hear people who are empowered, who have healthy boundaries, who, like you talked about it, the focus isn't all about the acting out, and the betrayal. It's like, I have support, I have a life, and these things can be going on, or, hopefully he's, making progress on his recovery, but it isn't rocking the boat all the time. And I think it's really hard as you're dealing with this, to not take on the shame of like, what is wrong with me? How did I not know? There's all these, big red flags along the way, and people were telling me, and I ignored it. And like you said, doing the best you can in the moment. And there are lots of reasons, but wow, so empowering if you're willing to. I love the journaling idea too, because I thought, if you just write, it's non-judgmental, it's not overthinking, it's just writing. And I think what comes out of that, is really telling. And then taking it to a safe person, a qualified professional, is a really good choice. And going, here's what I wrote, and getting that unpacked about what does this mean, and how do I navigate this? And the system will have resistance if there's an act of addiction. And you're right, it doesn't matter what form of acting out it is. If there's, because I was thinking, oh yeah, do you know how many people I've heard, talking about making excuses for, oh yeah, person drinking, or that person, whatever, and or even with sex, it's like, well, they were abused as a child. Yes, that is true, that is bad, that is horrible, and that's, they can change and shift and grow and come out of that. So, just leaning into the excuse or reason doesn't help, but the system's gonna not want to change. And so, the more you stay the same. But like you said, you're the frog in the water, and the water is getting cranked up, and at great detriment. Like you said, the frog's going to boil. So like betrayed partners who have major health crises, emotional, all of these things, and they're just devastated. So going, I'm turning the heat off. I'm going to start moving in a different direction with support, can be so empowering. So, okay. First question. My partner and I have had introductory meetings with CSATs now, and things seem to be moving in the right direction. I should be elated, but I'm still so hurt, anxious, paranoid, and untrusting. We've ordered the literature and paying a lot of money for therapy and are starting the work, but I'm so overwhelmed and bitter that my energy and money is going towards his addiction. I want to be supportive and invested, but I'm really struggling. I am stubborn to a fault and worry that I won't be strong enough to leave him if things don't change. This is our last chance, or else separation feels definite for me. I feel stuck. When is it time to leave the relationship, and how can I invest in this journey when I'm so hurtful? There's so much there, and this is what you work with. So can you please help this poor betrayed partner?
There are so many good layers to this question. So the first thing I want to start with is, where you're at is very normal in the introductory stages. It is okay for you to feel hurt, anxious, paranoid, and untrusting. I want to validate that. And so for you, it's going to be learning how to identify emotions and learn from those emotions, as opposed to becoming critical towards yourself because you're experiencing that. So that's one of the things that I work with trade partners on, and that is just validating the fact that these emotions are part of the process and the experience in the early days. It is very overwhelming. You're just now starting the process. You've got a lot of stuff coming at you. The fact of the matter is you're where you're at, not because of anything you've done. And now you're having to choose to go in and do some really hard work as a result of somebody else's behaviors and the choices they've made. So these big emotions will come up. One of the things I do with my clients is start to be very aware of what's going on internally for you. So that means I've got to start going in and identifying what emotions I'm feeling, and then sitting with it. So I teach my clients how to identify the emotion. Where do I feel it in my body? And what is it showing up for? What's its purpose for being there? Is it there to help me grieve? In your case, it might be, I'm really sad, and there is grief and loss that's a part of all of this that is going to be part of your healing process. And it may not be in the early days, but it's going to be at some point once you have that foundation of emotional regulation, which includes mindfulness and getting into your daily recovery routines, and you've got that connection with other people, and you've got a support system. Then you're going to be able to go into some of those harder, deeper things like the loss and the grief. But for right now, when it comes up and you're sad, just validate, yeah, this is really sad. or I'm really angry. And here's why I'm angry, because anger, I believe, is one of those emotions that help us make change, because anger has so much energy behind it, makes us aware of something that we can no longer live with, and that we need to do something about it and do something differently. So we can look at anger that way. It can be very, very productive. Again, as you go into your sessions with your therapist, talk about these feelings and emotions. Figure out what's associated with. Is it associated with certain triggers that I need to be aware of? Is it associated with certain thought patterns that I go into? Is it associated with some negative beliefs I have about myself, about the relationship? That's very, very helpful. So that's going to be part of you kind of working through initially some of those feelings and emotions. Along with that, you can be supportive of your addict partner. However, I want you to also be very supportive of yourself and the work you're doing in recovery, because that's where I want the majority of your energy to go, in supporting yourself. I know there's a lot of money and we want therapy to work. And I do see that if you do your work and you're working on helping you heal, you're going to gain so much from the therapeutic process. Even if the relationship doesn't work, I hear my clients say, oftentimes, I'm not the same person I was when I started this. I am so grateful that I'm the person I am today. I cannot believe how much more I know and how many more tools that I have. So for you, it's going to be focusing on your recovery day to day, doing things, identifying emotions, going in and working through it in your therapist's office. And also, you need to make a list of what are the things you're willing to live with and what are your bottom lines, that unless this changes, unless this is part of the relationship and the recovery, unless I have like trust, openness, transparency, and I see certain things, I cannot stay in the relationship. So get clarity on that. So with your therapist's help, determine, what are my bottom lines, that if this doesn't happen, then I'm not staying in relationship. It does take time as far as recovery. And I see a difference in the betrayed partners' speed at recovery and the addict partners. The betrayed partners move quicker through their recovery. It's very frustrating for them because we've got the addict partner who's just so slow. And remember, the reason is that the betrayed partner is connected to prefrontal. I come into this process, connected to that higher executive functioning part of my brain. When I'm an addict, I've been operating around in that survival part of my brain, in that limbic region. And part of recovery is I've got to learn to strengthen the connection and rewire the brain. So I'm now operating out of prefrontal. So yes, it's going to take some time, but you also need to look at a timeline as well. Your therapist will help you with that. If, let's say, you've been doing this work for a year and your partner, your addict partner, is still having slips, and the longest they're staying, in, let's say, sobriety, and they're not really doing recovery work, is they can go maybe 10, 12 days, 14 days, and then they have a slip. You need to seriously look at that and go, what's the reality here? Are they really truly doing recovery? And in that case, they are not. I realize that you said this is your last chance, or else separation seems definite. A lot of women do feel that way. A lot of men who are betrayed partners feel that way. Just recognize that it's okay to be there. But again, if you can kind of put together your bottom lines, knowing what you're willing to live with and what you absolutely will not, that can be your roadmap as to how you can prevent yourself from getting stuck. And again, if you can reframe it and shift it so that as you're investing in this journey, you're also investing in yourself. You're investing in your own healing just as much, if not more, than you're investing in the relationship. The ultimate goal is that we can have both of you be in recovery, both of you heal, and then bring you together and repair the relationship. Doesn't always happen, but as a therapist, that is my number one goal. That's the kind of overarching goal. And that is, I want both people to heal so we can repair this relationship. But in the meantime, as you work your recovery, you're going to have the strength and the ability to handle whatever comes.
And when I read I should be elated, I was like, I would be concerned if you were like, I'm elated. Like, no, I mean, you can have bits of hope that, that he can change. But I was thinking, I was nodding my head, like crazy when Debbie was talking about you're investing in you. Yes, it's because he, wasn't because of his addictive behaviors. That said, even if you left the relationship right now, guess what? We'd be recommending that you work on healing you. There's grief, there's loss, there's all of these things. And those that don't, do that work, struggle. And I was thinking when Debbie said, the betrayed partners, are ahead of the addicts. And I was like, that's because you're working with them. I see both sides of it. I see a lot of betrayed partners who are going like, he needs to go do the work. And, and I'm not going to do any, and I'm like, you're missing the point. This is like being deeply wounded and going, yeah, I'm going to stick a Band-Aid on it and, hope for the best. And I'm going, no, you need like internal work, you need help and stitches and whatever. And you deserve support, to help through all of this. So in or out, Dr. Rob, and I've had a number of partners who've talked about this too, putting the relationship in safe harbor and saying, and talk to your therapist, but I'm gonna give this 90 days or whatever. I'm just saying. But like, so that I take that question off the list and I don't have to focus on it. He doesn't have to focus on it, that we just go, here's what we're looking for. And we'll see, and we'll reevaluate, but I think that can be really helpful. Just this one, because otherwise the betrayed partner is going every day, should I stay or should I go? Should I stay or should I go? And it's, it's maddening. And to just go, I'm willing to play this out. I'm willing to see if he's able to step into recovery. And recovery, I hear so often for the people that are willing to do the work, the relationship that you can have, if he is, and if you both, are on that healing journey, is so much better, so much different. I did look up, because when I saw this, I was like, we just had the email on this. And so if you didn't get on our email list, it was, when is it time to separate from my addict? And so, email me, Tammy, TAMI at Seeking Integrity, if you didn't get that, and I'll forward that email to you. But I would give yourself grace, give yourself space, and, and understand, it's a chronic illness he has, and he can get help, and you can, and you guys can have a good relationship, but you don't have to, it's one of those, you absolutely can choose to leave, and that will be entirely up to you. And if you do, I think you'll know when your head and your heart align, and you'll go, yep, now I can do it. But you've done it, through a process, not just reactionary.
Yeah, and you reminded me of something I do say to betrayed partners, and that is, we don't need to make any decisions on what to do with this relationship. We tell, those in the program of recovery, you got to give it a year. Don't make any big decisions. Let's just suspend the outcome here and focus on recovery, which is basically what you said. And sometimes we do have to take a timeout, right? It might be a 90-day therapeutic healing separation, so that's what we're focusing on, is just our own recovery. So there's all these different ways that, depending on your circumstance, that we can kind of support you, and so that you don't feel this pressure of, I've got to make a decision now, if I stay or do I go. So I love what you said.
Yeah. And I should feel, like, take all the I should feels, like, what you feel is what you feel, but like, give yourself, again, space and grace to just, this is what I really feel, like all of the stuff that Debbie was talking about is about getting in touch with what your reality is. And right now your reality sucks, but it won't stay like that all the time. If, because you are taking this on, you are very aware, so this is a hard spot, and it can get different and better, so I'm trying to give you hope, but I'm not telling you it's going to be this rosy little picture of like everything's going to be fantastic forever. It's still life. So, okay, Debbie, you mentioned helping a betrayed partner trying to pull apart what was their part versus what was brought in by the addict's partner's addiction. I struggle to pull this apart, knowing I am an imperfect person. How do you help a partner pull this apart? I'm ready and willing to do my own part, but I don't want to take responsibility for what he and the addiction brought in. This is so tough.
This is so tough. Yes, you are right. because there's so much confusion. We've kind of talked a little bit about that today. And it's like, what's really going on here? And what did I do? What did he do? And oftentimes, I briefly mentioned, there's gaslighting that's a part of this. And so that's often confusing as a partner. I had somebody just this last week say to me, the whole time I've been in a relationship with this addict, he keeps telling me I'm the problem, I'm the problem. And she had actually taken on that attitude that everything that had gone wrong in the relationship was her fault, and it was up to her to fix it. So one of the things that we are doing is going, okay, let's talk about what the patterns are here and how are you reacting to this? And, are there things that you need to take accountability for? Truly, who's responsible for this? And it does take going in to see your therapist and talking through specific situations. I find, when my clients bring in what they're dealing with in real time, in real life, from session to session, then we can start to pull apart, like you said, what is your responsibility? Some of the basic things you're responsible for is your own recovery. So one of the things that I would say to my betrayed partners, and I do say, is, you know what, let's just focus on what you have control over regarding you. So let's focus on your recovery. Let's focus on maybe the thoughts that you're getting triggered into and some of the beliefs you have. And so let's start to identify those. Let's identify what's going on internally for you. And then let's talk about, are you reacting to this versus responding? So I teach my clients the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is very automatic. I'm doing it unconsciously. It's how I've always reacted to a situation. And I'm doing it without really, understanding the why. And so we've got to slow it down and go, okay, what's going on internally for me? What's triggered me? What are my thoughts? What are my emotions? What do I believe about this? And then we've got to take a pause and start to implement and use the recovery skills and tools that you have. So then you can make a conscious choice and respond in healthier ways. Oftentimes my partners will come in and they know, I know that I am just, the minute he says one word to me, I just explode. Okay, let's talk about what that's about. Let's then figure out what's happening internally for you. Then let's talk about your reactions. Now let's problem solve and let's talk about how can you respond. Now let's put boundaries in place around it. So now you've got a plan put in place. The other thing is, I had another client come in this last week, and the question throughout session was, well, I just need you to tell me, am I doing something wrong here? Is my partner, my addict partner, he's telling me I'm the problem. Is that true? Is that true? Right? So now sometimes we have to look at, addict behavior versus betrayed partner behavior and try to understand it, because sometimes it's gaslighting. So we have to figure out if that's what's going on. And then we sometimes just have to get real and go, are you doing that? Why are you doing that? How is that benefiting you if you are doing that? So we kind of talk about, maybe these are patterns you've been in this relationship from day one. Maybe this has happened since addiction's been part of the relationship. Maybe this is part of your behavioral patterns that go all the way back to how you learned to adapt and cope with life from the time you were very young. So you're right. It is a pulling apart process. It is not a one session process. It is something that kind of unfolds as part of the recovery work that you do. And yes, you are an imperfect person. What I tell my clients, at some point, you have to get to this place where you can make sure you're not in your own shame. And instead, you're able to stop and go, okay, what was my intent here? And what am I accountable for? If my intent was I did something because I really cared about my partner, and so my intention was I was trying to remind my partner to do the recovery. However, am I really accountable for that? Well, no, not necessarily, but I can express a need, a safety need in this. Then I can learn to figure out how to handle things, how to, in the next, moving forward, what I can do differently. So I'm constantly working with my clients on, okay, so that didn't work. How can we do it differently? What's really going on? What are you responsible for? What is your partner responsible for? And then again, we work on setting boundaries around it.
Yeah, I picked up on the I'm an imperfect person. I was like, that's called being a person. That's called part of being the human race. So, taking on any shame or blame, as being an imperfect person. I don't know a perfect person. So, that would not be helpful. I was thinking too, when you're talking about, is this a pattern that isn't just with the other person, but is this something that I do with other people? Because then, that is so for example, I worked really hard in it, so I'm not anymore, but I was very sarcastic and I thought it was funny. But there's a real bite to it, and I did it really with my husband, but I did it with other people too. And he called me on it, and he said, I just like, and I thought, what am I doing? And I was like, yeah, it's the funny, but there's a level of hurt. And I thought, I don't want to be that person. And I worked really hard on changing that across everybody, but that was absolutely me. That wasn't just the interaction with that one person. It was, a behavior that wasn't helping me across the board. So I think, kind of picking it apart and going, is this something that I tend to do, more universally, then it may be part me.
Mhm.
But actions, and you said respond rather than react. I always say the only thing I can control is my actions and reactions. I can choose to act rather than react. And you said respond, and I think that that's really key. So,
Yeah.
okay, Debbie, the next one. This is so hard. I'm quite the opposite. I attack things head on and have from the beginning, which often creates a blowout or conflict.
Well, if as a therapist, when I have a client who comes in with that, first of all, we've got to figure out why you're doing it. A lot of times is you're fighting for connection or you're feeling
Mm,
threatened, right? I am my very survival is threatened. And so I'm having to come at that. You're obviously you go into a fight response, right? You empower yourself that way. So we have to stop and look at it and go, okay, are there other ways we can do this? Because part of your recovery is going to be learning how to not go into conflict in order to feel like you're safe. There's other
mhm.
ways to do it. And so with somebody like that, I'll work with them on, okay, let's slow this down. Let's figure out what's going on. Let's figure out what you need for safety. So you don't have to feel like you have to go into fight response, which means you're really going limbic. And so we've got to work on getting you connected to prefrontal. So you're back into your logic, your reasoning, and your emotional regulation. So really work on things like mindfulness practice for you. 15, 20 minutes a day. I want you to do some guided meditation, some breathing, some journaling. We want to slow it down, keep you in your body, keep you grounded. Start journaling again. What is it that you're fearful of? Why is it that you feel like you need to attack? Usually it's because you feel threatened. What's so threatening? Are there other things you can do? Work with your therapist on putting some boundaries in place around this because we want to create safety not only for you, but also for the addict partner so that we can maintain this connection. It's like I said, you're really fighting for connection in this moment. I'm fighting to make sure that you're safe and secure so I can move towards you. However, oftentimes when we come at it that way with the fight response, we are creating the opposite of what we really want. So keep that in mind.
Okay, so the next one and last question, then we'll be out of time. My partner, after false disclosure, has laid major things he did on me again. Can't handle much more. I want a polygraph. Before a new disclosure, my therapist won't help me with it. Why? I hear about doing polygraphs before and after. What is the reasoning there? Do I need someone there with me to make sure he isn't lying and up till now to even continue? I don't want more trauma with half truths.
Yeah. You know, I've been dealing with a lot of this lately too. And that is you do as a betrayed partner need to have the full truth. And sometimes the reality is that some addict partners will tell you the full truth and some won't. Some are willing to give it up and share it because they want you to know everything because they're willing to do recovery, and others you're pulling it out of them. I'm not sure what your situation is. It sounds to me like it's the latter. So you've got somebody who's not willing to do that. Um, Again, people have different attitudes and approaches when it comes to polygraphs. I believe that the proper use of a polygraph has got to be carefully orchestrated and considerations, special things taken into consideration. So, for example, Do you need to go back and do a therapeutic disclosure? Has it been that your addict partner has never truly done a therapeutic disclosure? Do they need to have the kind of a therapist who will really make them go deep, who challenges them, who makes them write down a very detailed narrative, who gets them to work on accountability and taking accountability? And does that need to be part of it rather than just running in and doing a polygraph? Because there is something about doing a therapeutic disclosure that causes the addict to have to really come clean, push through their denial and push through their shame. And that gets circumvented if you go, I just want a polygraph. I need to know you've told me everything. Well, you might have to, as a partner, sit down and have to hear all the hard stuff because the addict partner has to go through that. You also got to know what are the indicators that they're telling you the truth, because you're going to see that in other aspects of your relationship. And it goes back to what I said earlier. Are they truthful about every aspect of their lives? Are they not lying about stupid, silly things? And then you need to see how your therapist feels about polygraphs. Some people agree, some people don't. You don't just go to anybody for a polygraph. You've got to have somebody that is trained in this. They're fully vetted. You have to understand the positives and the negatives about a polygraph, but it's not the number one go-to. There's other reasons to get this. You also need to start being aware of the pattern of your partner. Is this, you've got to kind of come out of your betrayal blindness on this. And if they've never been truthful, right? What good is it going to do you to have them go do a polygraph only to be told they're not truthful again? So those are all the things that I would talk with my clients about and kind of take them through, because there's a lot of steps that we need to make sure we go through to make sure we uncover all of the half truths and get you back to where you feel like you've had the full truth.
Yeah, and this to me feels like you need to back way up. I mean, he is still lying, and he will continue to lie. So I'd go back to the therapist and say, what is the goal here? If the goal is to have a foundation of recovery on which to move forward, then, this is what I need to see. And yeah, like him back to the drawing board of like working on his timeline, being prepared for a formal therapeutic disclosure. No, I think Debbie does a great job in including polygraph, but polygraph measures stress. It does not measure honesty. As Dr. Rob says, somebody could pass a polygraph and then go and act out immediately after. So it doesn't go, oh, now we know that there's, truth and we can move forward. And people with, like, there was somebody that has anxiety disorder. Like, he's been diagnosed with anxiety disorder and he failed the polygraph. I was like, well, of course he did. And then there's people who don't have any conscience and can lie and pass a polygraph no matter. So it's a measure of stress, not a measure of honesty. So understand that there's no protocol about, when to do it. Like you said, before or after, and all of these, there are certain questions like, are you telling the entire truth? That isn't even ethical within the Polygraph Society. So there's a bunch of caveats to this. What I hear is the pain. I don't want more trauma and half truths. You have an addict, and part of, at our treatment program is tell the truth and tell it faster. Having a 24-hour rule, an agreement where if he tells a lie about taking out the trash, like Debbie said a little while ago, I lied about that. He has 24 hours to come through. You can find, somebody moving forward on a path of truthfulness. You'll feel when your gut's churning, like I hear with this. This is one of the guys that I'm going, he should come to our treatment program. We can help, because that's what it's the underlying issues, and you can keep spinning around like this for a long time, so it sounds like he has not had enough help, to really address those issues and be able to, tell the truth and tell it faster. So
and go back to that therapist and ask, okay, so if we can't have a polygraph, what can we do? What can I do? What should I be aware of? What are some of, again, I keep going back to boundaries today, but what are the boundaries I need to put into place to create safety? If you don't feel like the therapist has good answers for you and can help lay out for you possible, things to do, then it's okay to get another therapist. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that therapist is going to agree with the polygraph, but you may go back and ask the therapist. They might have some very, very good reasons as to why, and ask them what their experiences has been as well. And so if there's no polygraph, then what? What can be done? What are some other helpful ways to create that safety I need and to finally get to the truth? So that's
Well,
kind
and if your therapists are talking, maybe your therapist knows what's going on his side of the equation.
of,
To me, it feels like he's not ready to be truthful. And I mean, I forgot what the record is right now, but we've had people. I think it was nine, disclosures. I'm like, kind of stop the insanity. Get the help that you need to. I mean, that just sounds so painful to me. So what do you need? You need him to get the help that he needs to be able to be truthful. You need to have, and maybe it's a conversation with both of your therapists and both of you about what is the goal. And you can say, my goal is to remain in this relationship, but I need, truthfulness. And he can go, well, I'm still sitting on the fence and I don't know. But like, to me, it would be like, this is what but hard boundaries are for your, healthy boundaries for you are for your safety. And then regardless of what he's doing or not doing, it isn't going to rock your boat, at every given moment. So how can you focus on healing you regardless of what he's doing? So, but I feel for you in this and him. I mean, living a lie of, I love that the name of our program is Seeking Integrity. We seek integrity for ourselves and help clients have that as well. And we hear that from partners and spouses that they see, that he's made progress. So there is hope. I just am not sure that your partner is at that, I don't know that the consequences have been bad enough yet for that person, unfortunately, but take care of you. Oh, we are so past time. I'm so sorry, but great answers. And thank you all for the great questions. And we'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks, Debbie.
Good.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.